Congratulations on the award of the French Legion of Honor and for all your contribution for education and intercultural dialogue. Amazing to see this recognition.
Welcome, monsieur.
그래서 Rinpoche die Légion d'honneur die tache de l'échou juste. Rinpoche selber Pentober Gatchambushab Shirat Namshas. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what invaluable lessons or insights from these teachers continue to guide you in your spiritual path today?
Titiri, Mari Jebi Nangatasa, Sanke Salioris, the Tichimaturi, Sanke Omari, Yomari Tita Inik and J. Marichi, Marisemti, Toluchita, Milkan to Pento Tuyagi, Shevshuagi, some Luyula Shugachi years.
So Rinpoche says that from his masters, he has been received explanations of the entire spiritual path to follow from the very beginning stages all the way up to achieving the enlightenment of a Buddha. And he has received these instructions of how to meditate this path and practice it so that one can achieve Buddhahood. But Rinpoche says he has not been able to do so entirely. And so he has not yet become a Buddha. Nevertheless, out of all that he's received, he has mastered his mind to a degree where he's completely devoted to helping others and doing his best to help others along the spiritual path and in general, for that matter, as well.
Persiunani, Tatanguni Hapedu, Chunjuri, Conchunjuri. Ini Kela Kujam Maridu Robani Yori. Your economy Payun Savite Sisha. Tini Kela see o Mari. To say Yape Deni, Shini Bell Penny. Lozona Romangurin that Lunie. Kimben Revutilla. Tashu Revutilla. Not Revun Yedu. Commanders on the pretty again Cheshusi. She was Dino Pesi Sobori. Hichi Kenari.
Senda Buria Re Kare.
President Buria, Lengdi Riri, Buriari.
Shiga.
Shoko, Shuachiki Mare, Lusan Shishunti Mare. She Sumputi Buriatri.
So, Genla, we call him Genla, or Genla. When he came from Buriat to Tibet, he was young, and he was only around 16. So he was able to begin his studies in Tibet at Dribung Gomang monastery, and he came with two other Buriat masters who were older than him and who already studied some of the Buddhist philosophy in their homeland. And anyway, so Genla, when he started his study program in Dribung Gomang, at a young age, and he completed his studies in an excellent manner. He was a brilliant student. And when Rinpoche himself went to Gomang Dratsang, at the time, amongst the masters who were teaching Buddhist philosophy in the monastery, the four foremost teachers were all Buryat or Mongolian or from Mongolia, and so it was really very, very remarkable. And Genla's entire life he spent teaching in the monastery in Tibet, and then later in India. And then, of course, when he came to Europe, he taught also for example, in Rinpoche's center and in other places in Italy, in Holland. He stayed a long time in Holland, of course, you know that. And he also was invited to Italy to teach, and Switzerland. Of course, he lived in Switzerland, so sometimes he taught there. But then Holland should do the mangcho, chabe mangcho, Holland should do the somna chasomna.
Then Holland should do Tumbuchi Warana should do.
Before coming to Europe, he was at Varanasi University, so he began writing his treatises on Buddhist philosophy at Varanasi in India. And then when he came to Holland, he was invited to Holland, he continued there. He continued to compose his works there. And then jail Kempo now about the these one did
Kimbuna, the Gundin Kimbulgona, Kimbunan, that the commanders on Shiraka Timburi, commanders on Yaso Kenari.
So also when after already Khyentse Rinpoche had come to Europe, then he was selected by His Holiness the Dalai Lama to become abbot of Drepung Gomang in southern India. And his role there was very precious and very important in sort of recreating this monastery in Mungod in southern India. He had extraordinary devotion and enthusiasm and energy for that. Kepchikute the Halle Nangdua. Yana Tora Shrata Namde. Kulo Toboche, then to Semju Nanji. This is Shushandir. I'm just want to add because I was in Mungod when Khyentse Rinpoche was at the monastery, at abbot of the monastery, and Khyentse Linga Rinpoche, who was living at the time at Drepung Losaling. He, in front of a lot of people, he praised Khyentse Rinpoche Genla highly, saying even at his age, which was already quite advanced, he had the courage to accept to become abbot and work hard to reconstitute the monastery and contribute to teaching all the time. Despite his age and everything, he praised him really very highly. He said it was quite extraordinary.
Going back to your experience in teaching in France, so following your escape to India in 1959, you were invited to France and taught in Paris for decades. And how did this transition from Tibetan monastic education to Western academia shape your approach to preserving and transmitting the teaching, the Dharma?
Very simple, Paulus. The unique content so condition degrees. Any condition was to muscle.
So Rinpoche said he didn't really find it difficult. When before leaving India, he had an audience with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and His Holiness said, just go and do your best and share your knowledge as well as you can with others. And if ever you face any difficulties, you can speak, contact me. This is what His Holiness told him. And Rinpoche said he had no need to do that because he didn't find it so difficult, to move from Asian country and a monastic environment to a Western society. Sunja lamsan na yo marwa Rinpoche. Susan teaches. No.
Lo mangburin tidu zaman kalurum bacheta keho
Kamapa.
kamam bachira pe sunjunangi ore.
No.
Jezantang sunju chegme chu chu chegme tang tanda kan tutu milpa rogochia chigi pöke zu pöke lamda pöke labia tita tende keche shooting ngare lengen du tiri
Rinpoche ranch happy.
tini chebinza chisa ni pöke labroda pöke pege labche pöke pege lamdeni keju mangu shiu chungre
No.
keju mangcho ngi kirure Ngi tu mai bini sama do yo ma. Dendi cheni, wada du cheni, shabjir bshibi sirvada.
So when Rinpoche first, was working at the university, and he worked with Tibetologists, also working with them to help them understand the Tibetan texts and so forth. But he mainly moved on towards teaching Tibetan language at the School of Oriental Studies, the INALCO in France, in Paris. And his contribution at that stage was really to teach Tibetan language, spoken language, written language to foreigners. And in fact, at that time, there were two lamas who came into France to teach the Dharma. Was Kala Rinpoche and Kamapa Rinpoche, and they were teaching, and so Rinpoche was not teaching, but what he did, Rinpoche, at that point, was to train, in fact, these Westerners to become translators for them. So most of the translators at that period of time were formed by Rinpoche at the university, and that was his contribution at that phase.
Kil tadi university de sarve shuru bjmarbe. Ni nirbe. Dwantis nintini. Rita. Otari dire. Tini nga Amerikal chik chimbi. Tedu ta pegi phata du. Raminda chu. Pebe chu shektu. Pebe tindi re. Tati sulte du ngare tatindi. Dizu shektu ta ngare shimbat chik shashana. Kando me samjeje. Into lane dini. Official share. Some course.
Because at the beginning, even though some people asked Rinpoche to teach the Buddhism, Rinpoche didn't think about it doing it right away. It took quite a while. But then he also traveled to the United States. He saw how some Tibetans were teaching Buddhism there, and he came back and he thought, well, after all, he decided that maybe he had something to contribute at that level too, teaching about the Dharma. And so in 1977, he began to teach. And slowly but surely, of course, his activities in that respect, this was done privately, not at the university. But that activity developed, first of all, parallel to his professional work at the university. And then when he retired, he devoted himself full time to teaching the Dharma in the West and the East, and in many different places.
You share your vision behind founding the Ganden Ling Institute in France in 1978, and how has it evolved over the years to support your mission in spreading Buddhist teaching in Europe and beyond? And you also have established many Dharma centers around the world. And what have you learned about adapting, I guess, the Tibetan Buddhist teaching to the diverse cultural audiences without losing their essence?
Namjung Kangbajda Katu Legi Urba. Indici Tikkali Kaushi was too. Doesn't it? Chuso Surus Gudus. So what's the Ine? She said to me, Kunling Miss. Did none. Tangutung Harali Yoris. I think Yoris. Mimangu Yudi to whom should I use a race of zero? Then Mimangu made you out at home. Should I mean do some dendism for you series? Read this judgment and then Minjum said to Yarn reading Kunling Miss. Children to David Pubin did to series.
So Rinpoche, he began teaching in Paris and at people's houses and so on, but slowly, more and more people were coming, so it became necessary to rent places to teach in. And to rent a place, you have to create an association, a society. otherwise you cannot rent places. So he created an association. It wasn't originally called Gandaling, it was called Gebel Janjuling. And so that he started creating the center this way, and slowly but surely there were more and more people, and then there was more and more interest, and we continued to rent some places in Paris because that was necessary. But then there was an aspiration to also to create something more stable, and so we decided to buy something, and that was in where Rinpoche is situated now, outside of Paris, and then that slowly evolved into what we call now today Gandaling, which is a congregation. It got congregation status, which is not easy to get. So it wasn't easy to get. It requires a lot of paperwork and getting the prime minister to sign a document and things like that. So, but that happened about more than 20 years ago. And so, and then the people invited him from all different places. And these do. So one particularity Rinpoche wants to point to about his way of functioning in terms of the Dharma, which is that even though he created centers and so on, he has never ever made people pay to receive his teachings. So that is something that for him was not acceptable, and for many different reasons. But one of them being that to avoid the kind of thought which might occur, if you made people pay an entrance fee, then if the evening, then when they come, if there's not that many people, Rinpoche might have had the thought, oh, there's not going to be much money coming in tonight because there's not that many people coming in, and that sort of thing. So of course, that was totally no question for Rinpoche asking for some kind of payment for the Dharma teachings he gave. And of course, people were free to make donations if they wanted to, but it never was required, and never is required for any payment to receive his teachings. And the Jewish and the Yorika that Lumba Mambo Sunjana whatever Panensi, Europe Lumba Mambo, Asia, the Shiri the Lohar about Chusa, Shugi, Sundan, Mendawan, Nangi Joy, adapte, so she pulled no. So of course, when teaching, Rinpoche said that according to the different countries he taught in, once he got to know the people a little bit better in those places, of course he did some mild, some adaptation to their tendencies, their needs, and so forth. That's a characteristic, anyways, of Buddhist teaching. You always have to adapt to whoever is your teaching. The Buddha himself did that,
Indonesia
the one Asian country where Rinpoche's activity has spread the most is Indonesia, and Rinpoche's went there for more than 30 years, and it's become very widespread. His followers there, and there's many different places in Indonesia where he has created centers and many students of Buddhism there. Also a monastery. One of his Rinpoche students created a monastery that is connected with Rinpoche's monastery, Dagpo in India, and there are Indonesian, quite a number of Indonesian monks there, who are all Rinpoche students. So Dorje had a good relationship with the 13th Dalai Lama, and he was actually his tutor, his debating partner. Yeah. His title was Senjab Dorje, which means a debating partner of His Holiness. And so, of course, the English were getting involved in Tibet at that stage too, and there was they wanted to actually, arrest Dorjiev for thinking he was a spy for the Russians, of which wasn't the case. But anyways, there were those kind of political things background. I'm sure you know all about that. Yeah.
Now that you're retired from formal teaching at INALCO, what are your current priorities in the Dharma? Maybe retreat practice or writing or personal study? And how do you continue to support practitioners apart from giving this interview to us?
She's a Rinpoche. That Chaleda Samjanish Mama Chimberba. She was on the Barola Karinang Yorbe, Rinpoche Chabet Somnang Yorbe. Chigi Sunjanang Yorbe, some Chigsunang Yorbe.
Some Suyori, Yori.
Since Rinpoche retired, Rinpoche retired a long time ago in 1993. Yeah? So he's been doing a lot of teaching since then and writing as well, but mostly teaching the Dharma in his Dharma centers and guiding retreats as well. We do yearly retreats. And Rinpoche, despite his great age, is still teaching some. And so that's basically how he spends his time. Yeah. Maritse, kontu namba digi Rinpoche. To Yamshin Nang Yorba, she's a Digi Rabata. To do Shishan Dirba. Shindak. So actually, the most important encounters for Rinpoche were with his own teachers, and it's the encounters he had with them, the time he shared with them, but also the instructions that he received of them that are continue to live in Rinpoche and continue to affect him, and he's continually thinks about what they taught him in that sense, you know.